Tame the wild desert as you attempt not to fade into the annals of history. We're taking a quick peek at Predynastic Egypt. Predynastic Egypt is a turn-based strategy game meant to be somewhat of a historical simulation for the creation of Egypt. It's the fourth title by Clarus Victoria and their second to get a PC release. Clarus Victoria has mostly focused on mobile titles, all of which sharing the ideas of historical simulation but aimed at different time periods. Their pre-civilization series has worked its way up from the Stone Age to ancient Greece, and has now reached into the shifting sands of Egypt, but not without a few problems. Clarus Victoria found themselves up to their necks in sand with the release of Predynastic Egypt, originally titled Pre-Civilization Egypt. Clarus was rather quickly faced with the threat of a lawsuit from the game publishing company 2K. 2K being the publisher for Firaxis' Sid Meier's Civilization series, and they weren't all too happy to see another game use Civilization in its title, especially with the game being in the same genre and released only 10 days before Civilization 6. Even though pre-civilization and civilization have different meanings, and Clarus Victoria didn't have any issues with their previous titles in the series, their games were still removed from the Steam marketplace for a short time until they changed the name. Considering there are other games on Steam that have the word civilization in the title, such as Idle Civilization, Fall of Civilization, Lost Civilization, and the Galactic Civilization series that didn't have any issues with 2K, I don't really understand how this threat of a lawsuit had enough grounds for Steam to pull Clarus Victoria's games. Even though Clarus released a video going over the threat, no one seems to have really picked up on it nor given it any attention at all, and thus they were forced to change the name. Pre-Civilization Egypt became Predynastic Egypt, with the Pre-Civilization moniker being dropped from Victoria's other PC releases, though they're still there for the devs' mobile releases, at least for the time being. The name and logo may be different, but the game still plays exactly as it did before. Predynastic Egypt is a management game where you're given the task of creating the country of Egypt. It's somewhat similar to Pharaoh, where you have to gather resources in order to expand and stay alive, as well as, being set in Egypt. Unlike Pharaoh, Predynastic Egypt is a bit of a simplified game, but not necessarily an easy one. There's no kind of city building per se. Instead, you create groups of workers from the current population and use them to work the land or build new structures. Occupying tiles on the game's map, workers will gather points for food, production, culture, or religion. You can also use them to scout out new areas by removing the fog of war, as well as interacting with other tribes. I don't claim to be an Egyptologist, but the story the game paints is believable enough about the journey of the tribe of Horus to dominate the desert. From exile to the creation of Egyptian gods and the unification of the country, the game goes through all of it within its playtime, the main difficulty being completing the tasks of unification within a historical time limit. There are 220 turns within a round of Predynastic Egypt, and the game is meant to be played multiple times until players learn the best way to build their empire. Everything in the game has a cause and effect to it, and it's important to keep in mind what resources you have as different objectives appear throughout the timeline. Some of these objectives are mandatory, while others will let you keep playing if you fail, but it's not advised. From what I've played of the game, you've really gotta be on top of things, or everything can quickly spiral out of control. The real key is figuring out how to not waste your turns. Workers are needed to gain resources, but they also require resources to make as well as food to keep alive. Buildings and improvements need both time and production in order to be made, and will quickly eat up your turns as they sit unfinished. Figuring out where to put your workers when, as well as the build order for structures, is the only way to stand a chance, but the game throws a bit of a monkey wrench into the system. While the structures you can build never change, land titles are randomized each time you start a new game. There's no way to know before scouting an area what you're going to find, for the most part. At the start of the game, you're given a tile worth 1 food, followed by a scouting tile which reveals a tile worth 2 food per turn. That always seems to be the same no matter how many times you start the game. Specific tribes, such as Ombos and the Palestines, are always in the same location as well, but everything else seems to change with each new game. Structures are always built in the same places on a map, and there's no way to pick where they're put. No one besides your tribe really move around the game board anyway, so it's not super important where they're located. As long as you've explored the area a structure is supposed to be built in and have cleared away any inhabitants, you can build whatever structure you're trying to build. They always tell you where they need to be built, as well as give you a handy Go There button that'll zoom the camera over to the correct location. It's nice for making sure you own the land you need, especially if there's an evasive tribe that needs to know how to play nice. How you handle the unification of Egypt is really up to you to a point. There's only one tribe, Ombos, that's particularly hostile towards Horus. Everyone else can be bargained with as long as you don't tick them off too much. Interacting with tribes is as simple as everything else. Just click and drag a group of workers on top of them. Depending on how that tribe feels about you will depend on what you can do by either trading, raiding, or completely subduing them. Tribes can become friendly to your cause by showering them with gifts, and if you give them enough stuff, they'll give you the option of uniting with them. Because if there's one thing people like, it's stuff. Of course, if you don't want to spend your time or resources uniting with them, as the cost is sometimes ridiculous, there's always the option of just taking over by force. Combat in Predynastic Egypt is really simple. Almost too simple, to be honest. All it seems to come down to is whoever has the higher number at the start of a fight. The game shows a predicted outcome before a battle, which is helpful in deciding if that fight is worth it. Once in a battle, there's really nothing to do but watch the numbers change. No animation, no interaction, no nothing. The only time I ever really had to worry about a fight is if the prediction was a draw. Sometimes there can be a swift change in the battle if one faction outflanks the other or if a commander is killed. The computer decides these things on its own without any player input. More than not, these changes are meaningless, but every now and then the game can throw a curveball, so it's best to only fight when you've got a higher number than the enemy. Keep in mind that tribes that are angry with you are likely to raid your settlements, and your actions with unification as well as overpopulation and other factors can cause unrest amongst the population, leading to revolts. Settlements are easy to defend, but doing so is a drain on your military resources, and revolts stop any resource gathering from whichever tile they take place on until they've been dealt with. Fighting isn't the only thing important, as unlike civilization, there aren't multiple ways to win. Instead, you have to win at everything or end up losing overall. Defeating the Ombos clan, uniting the tribes of the Nile, getting to the end of the structures menu, as well as getting enough culture to discover everything are all required. Succeeding at some and failing others will leave you in a bad spot or cause failure overall. From the time I've spent with the game, failure is not an option. After all, there's only 220 turns. Failing an objective that doesn't end the game right there will give you some kind of punishment. Once you get behind in Predynastic Egypt, you might as well start over from the beginning. It is very difficult to play catch-up if caught unprepared, regardless of how you set the game's difficulty. Unlike most games, Predynastic Egypt doesn't have an easy, medium, or hard mode. Instead, it gives you 12 different options to pick from to set how difficult or easy the game will be. Some of the options just give you more points at the end of the game, while others will affect how plentiful resources are or how much one resource grows. It's a nice way to add some replayability to the game since you can take things at your own pace. Egyptian gods are also important as you play through a round of Predynastic Egypt. Spending the religion you've accumulated by honoring different gods will cause different boons to happen. Honoring Horus speeds up the build process by 2 turns, while honoring your forefathers gives you more culture for a short period of time. They can be a good way to get out of a bind, and unlike Pharaoh, there aren't any penalties for praising one over the other. The only god that'll cause problems is Seth, but it's part of an objective to beat the game. While the game is simplified compared to titles like Pharaoh and Civilization, it has enough depth and strategy to keep me interested every time I play it. Predynastic Egypt manages to capture that one more turn mentality classic to the Civilization games. A successful playthrough clocks in at a little over an hour depending on how many of those 220 turns you use, which helps with experimentation when figuring out build orders and turn orders. I do wish there was more than one scenario to give the game a bit more replayability. Currently, the game only has one scenario, with the tribe of Horus uniting Egypt. The objectives to win are always the same, with the same big events happening at the same times. While this helps when creating a strategy, it can get tiring due to the lack of variety. The game's overall presentation is rather simple as well, while still being well done. The hieroglyphic art and animations, as well as the game's music and atmosphere, do a fantastic job at pushing the overall theme. I can definitely see the mobile design behind the game with its length and replayability, which makes sense considering the previous games in the series were mobile titles first. However, Predynastic Egypt currently only has a PC release on Steam for $9.99. If you're a fan of strategy games and are looking for something small to quickly sink your teeth into, I'd say give this game a shot. I personally enjoyed what I played of it, and I'm interested to see if the devs will expand their ideas into larger titles in the future. Thanks for watching. Please let me know what you think of the game or this video in the comments section. I'm Mega Pie Man, and I'll talk to you guys later. Want to see more quick peeks? Click on the video on the left to take a look at Santa Rockstar Steam Edition, a holiday game about saving Christmas with the power of metal. Or click on the video on the right to see some of my favorite and least favorite games from 2016.